real estate investment, just like every other business, has its own set of risk. And while real estate can be very instrumental in helping you build generational wealth, there are also sad stories of people who have lost their hard-earned life savings, because they didn't know of these risks that I will reveal to you in this video. I'll give you 5 major reasons why real estate is not a risk-free investment. And at some point in this video, I'll give you the best tips on how you can overcome these risks just so you can successfully invest in real estate. So be sure to stay through to the end of this video. Let's open up the conversation with point number one. One of the major risks in real estate has to do with the risk of land scam. Land scams are not a new thing in real estate at all. In fact, almost everybody knows someone who has at least lost their money in trying to buy one land or the other. There are a lot of scammers out there. We have the people who will sell the land to more than one person. We have others who don't have the land at all, but then they have some form of fake document or very dubious means of still selling the land to people. Then we also have the people who take your money and not give the land that you all agreed on. So what happens often is that they would allocate a different land to you, or give you a different land other than the one that you all agreed on or the one that you paid for. As a real estate broker, these are stories that I hear all the time, and it's so heartbreaking, even in the face of all the education and all the information that I keep putting out there with regard to real estate investment and every other thing included. People still end up falling victim to real estate scams. Often it's sad people come to me after these very avoidable situations have happened to them. So that's one risk you would want to pay attention to, just so you don't fall victim. The second risk has to do with the risk of land dispute. Buying land or a house has been disputed in court. You can buy land from a particular family, then another family comes up. It's why often when you take a walk through town, you would see properties, sometimes fenced land with inscriptions on them indicating that a particular land has been disputed. Often you would see the suit numbers written on them. Now, there's a recent case of one of my clients, who needed me to do some due diligence on a land for them. I went to the land with my surveyor just so we could pick details of the land, only to realize that the land had inscriptions on them indicating that the land was under dispute. So I had to get in touch with my client. We went to see the landowner, and the landowner's explanation was that, she's so positive she's going to win the case. Yes, of course, the land is under dispute, but we shouldn't worry. My clients can go ahead and buy the land, and she's so positive. We should just rely on her assurance and buy the land. I knew where all of this was headed. I just had to strongly advise my client against it, even though it was at a very prime location, the price was right, it was titled and all of that. I had to strongly advise my client against it, and she heeded my advice. Now, can you imagine what would have happened if my client had gone ahead to buy the land? She would there's a possibility of a woman losing the case in court. And I mean, whoever gets to win the case could come back to my client and ask them to pay them again. It's why you have instances of people paying twice for one plot of land. Who wants to go through all of this stress? Or imagine if she had just gone ahead to buy the land without doing her due diligence at all. This was a land in a very prime location. So it was worth millions of Ghana cedis. You don't want to lose such hard-earned money. Right. So stay away from land that's under dispute. If it's under dispute, please do not rely on the assurance of the land seller or the landowner that, I will win the case. Don't worry. I have all the documents. Blah, blah. Please don't. When they win the case and the land is still available and you're still interested, you can go and do your due diligence and buy, but not when the case is in court. There's also the risk of buying land or a property with very little or an almost expired lease. There's also another recent case of a new real estate company. They were trying to buy some land in a very prime location, this one worth millions of dollars. It was actually an old house on a vast land, very, very prime location. Okay. Now, when it comes to doing your due diligence on properties like that, you often would want to do a consolidated search. This one is more detailed. It reveals more details than the usual search that a lot of you are used to. So I had to do the consolidated search. Then we got to know that this land had been used as a collateral for a loan. Again, I mean the lease on the land was very little. Prime location. They've been on the land for a very long time. So we had to go back to the negotiation table and talk about the price and everything, and also talk about how the landowner was going to clear off their collateral just so my client doesn't end up buying a land that's been used for a loan. You don't want to inherit a land with issues. So we had to go and renegotiate the price. The land finally, just to summarize everything, the landowner dealt with the collateral bit, and I mean, in the end, both parties had a win-win situation. That's why I keep saying that take your time, do your due diligence, please. Don't go buying land with the money in your bag and with your checkbooks in your car ready to just sign off and pay for the land. No, take your time. Don't buy land like you go to the mall to buy a bottle of water and stuff like that. No, it doesn't work that way. Just take your time, do your due diligence. Now, the third risk in real estate investment has to do with the risk of investing in a wrong location. Before you invest in real estate, it's very important for you to set your goals right and find a property that fits the purpose, a property that fits your end goal. This is one big mistake I see a lot of people do. Buying in the wrong locations, and for the most part of it, they buy it based on emotions. They are buying the land because that's where their mom is from, that's where their dad hails from. They are buying the land because a relative, suggested that they buy it without doing any research, without sitting down to analyze or get to know them cash flow potential of this particular area you're investing into, nothing at all. For instance, if you built out a very expensive apartment in a market or in a location where the income levels or the lifestyle of the people is such that they cannot afford these expensive apartments, it would end up affecting your cash flow. You end up experiencing a lot of vacancies because the people you have built for cannot afford the apartment you have built. There's a mismatch between your supply and what the market is demanding. That's one thing you would want to pay attention to. Often like I said, this happens when people do these investments with a lot of emotions attached. For instance, you could be an investor who likes big spaces, big living room, big kitchen, big hall, big everything. But the people you're building for are students. These people cannot afford all of these big spaces. The least they can afford are probably studio apartments or one-bedroom apartment. So you build to suit them. If the demography of your location says that about 60 to 70% of the people in a location are students, and you do three-bedroom apartments instead of studios or one-bedroom apartment, it would affect your cash flow because there's a mismatch between your supply and what the market is demanding. That's why research is very important. Information is everything when it comes to real estate investment. You also would want to check if there's been any appreciation in the last 3 to 5 years. And with regard to this particular location you intend to buy, what's the level of security in the area like? Are there industries in this location? Are there good roads, amenities, etc.? So there are certain locations that analysts have projected to experience a land bubble in the next 2 to 3 years. I'll do a special video on some of these locations just so for people who are interested in doing land banking, you could look into investing in these locations just so you can sell, when the property appreciates. So do well to subscribe to the channel just so you don't miss that video when I upload it. And the fourth risk has to do with the risk of property management. Now, the management of a property is just as good as the returns that you make from it. In other words, when you manage a property right, okay, you're sure to make very good returns and vice versa. Often when we talk about property management, the most immediate thing that comes to mind has to do with the management of the property at the rental level. I mean, after the property is completed and it's ready to be rented out. But property management goes beyond that. In this case, okay, I am talking about property management right from the construction stage. How much supervision went into the construction of the property? If you put up a bad property, okay, and you bring in the world's best property managers, your property will still end up not doing well. It's why in real estate we constantly say get it right from scratch. When the foundation is good, everything will fall into place. Right. So right from when you're choosing your location, did you do your research well? Okay. There are certain locations where, for instance, there's a lot of salt in the soil. If you're building along the coast in such a location, how much effort did you put into ensuring that the land was properly cured before you built or you put up your property on it? If you're building, for instance, in a waterlogged area, on a clay soil, sandy soil, even in a rocky area, what are you doing differently to ensure that you're safe? Property management travels as far as the design development stage of your property. Okay, there's this particular commercial building in Accra where this building doesn't have windows. Until date, the building still remains very unattractive for most tenants. So people go into that building or they rent that commercial property and in a matter of just some few months, they already want, their money refunded because the property has no windows. What this means is that if you're a business in there, you constantly have to, pay a lot for electricity bills because you're constantly using your ACs. Imagine operating in a space without windows. You know, over time, your electricity bill piles up and it adds to your cost of production as a business. As a result of this particular commercial property, even though it's situated in a very prime location, till date remains very, very unattractive. The next level of property management has to do with the day-to-day running of a property. That's after you have built it or after you have bought it. So you can have a very nice property, nice apartment and everything where you tick all the right boxes, but your business could still end up not doing well if you do not have an effective property management system that sees to the effective day-to-day running of the property. There's an example of a couple, okay, who once invested in a property and they left this property in the care of a relative. So they had a relative in place as a property manager for them. Initially, they were getting some cash flow, as expected. But after some time, the cash flow dipped and they started recording more vacancies. Now, for a property where the couple had gone for a construction loan to put up, it meant in a way or the other they had to figure out how to pay their monthly mortgage. Else, the risk foreclosure or the risk losing the property. Unfortunately for them, they ended up losing the property and a valuation of the property was done, and then they got to find out that this particular property right from the construction stage had serious leakage issues that persisted for years. And instead of the property manager to bring in professionals to check on the leakage and get it fixed permanently, resorted to using cheap means to resolve the leakage. I mean, both in the roofing, The walls were constantly soaked in water. Tenants would rent the apartment. Shortly, shortly after, they would end up, asking for a refund of their money because the property was unattractive. Imagine living in a room with chipped, where your wall is constantly chipping off, and the walls are constantly soaked. Very, very unattractive. Again, this particular property had become some form of a hub for criminals. So you had the police constantly conducting swoops in this property. It worsened the unattractiveness of the property so much so that people didn't want to rent in this particular property. Now, the saddest part of this whole story is that the valuation later showed that the property had lost so much value, so much so that it was even lesser than the initial capital that a couple had invested into it. Such a sad story. It tells you of how critical property management is. It's a risk that you need to be aware of. Now, the fifth risk in real estate has to do with the risk of not investing at all. And for me, this is the biggest risk. Okay, real estate has its set of risk, but it's a medium risk investment. We have high risk investments like you would find in crypto. We have medium and low risk investment, and real estate falls, in between. It's a medium risk investment. The good thing, however, is that these risks I have highlighted above can be managed if you work with the right people, if you have the right information, you're investing at the right time, you're good to go. It's risky not to take risk. If you risk nothing, you gain nothing. Not investing at all because you want to avoid risk or all of the risks that I have highlighted above is you risking not building generational wealth. So if you need to buy land, let's do your due diligence. Or save yourself all the stress. Just work with a trusted real estate broker. I am always available to assist you in helping you, make informed decisions when it comes to real estate investments. Just get in touch with me. Tell me what your budget is. Tell me what your preference is. We'll work around. We'll have a nice conversation. I'll give you recommendations, advice on what to do, just so you're able to make an informed decision. So real estate, just like every other business, has its own level of risk. In fact, life itself is a risk. You take Uber, you order food online, you breathe in air. All of these are risk. Anything can happen at any time. So these are my top 5 risks when it comes to real estate investment.